Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the North Lincolnshire series, a district of 56 parishes in the north of Lincolnshire. Let's see which one we're visiting today. Hi everybody, welcome back to North Lincolnshire again. Now, like last week, I'm beginning this episode at a dead end. Now, you remember in Santon in the Appleby episode, you could go a bit further if you had authority. Technically speaking, you can here, but it's very unlikely that you will, because this is a disused mine. This is Dragonby mine, and it's beyond these gates. And it's quite an interesting thing all by itself. I could make a 10-minute video just basically about this, but of course I haven't got time to do that. What I do have time to do though is cover the village of Dragonby. It lies within the parish of Roxby-cum-Risby. This North Lincolnshire episode is sponsored by Past Days, a family history blog by June Terrington. You'll find her link in the description. And this video is also sponsored by Jamie's Fitness Studio, based on Low Road, Graham, near Curtin in Lindsay. Jamie is one busy lady. Check her out by calling 07906 749 574 or emailing hello@jamies.co.uk. Online membership is available. There's a link to her Facebook page in the description. Jamie's Fitness Studio. Get fit, get happy, get healthy. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Roxby-cum-Risby is a parish to the northeast of Scunthorpe, which contains the villages of Dragonby, Risby, which is split into two parts, and Roxby, the main village. Roxby is situated approximately 4 miles north of Scunthorpe and 1 mile southeast of Winterton on the A1077, atop a hill which overlooks the Humber Estuary. The whole area Roxby-cum-Risby covers was a hotbed of Roman activity, and that's hardly surprising. Just to the east is Ermine Street, the most famous Roman road in these parts. In the 1700s, a Roman mosaic was discovered near to the church in Roxby. Several attempts to excavate the mosaic were made, but it was not until 1972 when it was accurately excavated. Later excavations found it was part of an aisled structure which formed the floor of a suite of rooms at one end of a Roman villa. Further excavation in 1989 revealed a farmhouse attached to the villa. As settlements these days, Roxby, Risby and Dragonby all mind their own business, quietly sitting in the shadow of their larger neighbours Winterton and Scunthorpe. That said, they do still have their own attractions, particularly in Dragonby, where there's something very unique that not a lot of people know about. Let's get cracking and see if we can find the landmark in question. We start with Risby, and there's not much to show you here. We're driving from Appleby along Risby Road towards the A1077. Risby is very much a scattered settlement with isolated houses on both sides of this road. Despite that, it's technically split into two parts. These are Low Risby, which is closer to Appleby, and High Risby, which is closer to the A1077. It only really has two major landmarks. One is Sawcliffe Manor Country House. You'll find that off to the right up a track in High Risby, just before the A1077. Risby also has something called Brackenholmes End, which is a local nature reserve, sited off this very road. Risby used to have a church dedicated to St Bartholomew, which predated St Mary's Church in Roxby. However, this no longer exists as it was closed by the Church of England in 1911. Both High and Low Risby also have deserted medieval village sites. Here's a bit more history explaining how Roxby and Risby came to be combined. They were separate hamlets which were both mentioned in the Domesday Book. At that time, Roxby was under the ownership of Gilbert de Gant. Risby was under the ownership of the Abbot of Peterborough and was a vicarage in the gift of the Priory of Thornholme, which we spoke about briefly back in Appleby. It was later annexed by Roxby for the purposes of forming one ecclesiastical parish. Risby's name derives from Old Scandinavian and it means farmstead among the brushwood or by a clearing. The first meaning is more likely. In the Domesday Book, the village's name is given as Riseby. A village with the same name exists in Suffolk. After hitting the A1077 and making a left turn, we turn right just before entering Scunthorpe and head down into Dragonby. Dragonby is a dead end. Members of the public can go no further, legally at least, than here. This is the entrance to Dragonby Mine, which was opened in 1950, some 12 years after its near neighbour at Santon. Both mines supplied Scunthorpe steelworks with iron ore and are still inspected regularly. Although they're not mined anymore, Scunthorpe Steelworks still uses the water that's pumped from them both. Dragonby, much like Roxby, Risby and the rest of this part of North Lincolnshire, was occupied by the Coriol Torvi tribe before the Romans invaded the area. In later times, it was owned by the Elwes family, the very same who still reside in Elsham. Before 1912, Dragonby was called Conesby Cliff. That was until Lady Winifred Elwes chose Dragonby as a name for what was at the time a new settlement of cottages built to house the families of Catholic workers from Scunthorpe Steelworks. Okay, so there's a gap between the houses here which takes you up to Dragonby's most impressive and most well-known feature, although I imagine that it's not really well known outside of Dragonby because even I didn't know this existed until I did a bit of research about this place. So we're heading up through this, well, around this gate, and you'll be able to see in the distance like a rocky outcrop just there. That, my friends, is the Dragonby Dragon. Lady Winifred Elwes called this place Dragonby in honour of the Dragonby Dragon. This will be familiar to those who watch every video I make. I made a Tales from the Village Green episode about this a few weeks ago. The Dragonby Dragon is an ancient rock formation which was formed as a result of a nearby limestone spring. It has a curving serpentine-like shape, which is why it's called the Dragon. There are two local legends around this. The first says that this is the body of an actual dragon which was turned to stone by a wizard, and children love that idea. The other says the rock is all that remains of a church which sank into the earth with its congregation still inside. On the anniversary of this supposed disaster, ghostly bells are said to be heard here, ringing for mass. Whatever you choose to believe, the dragon is by far and away Dragonby's centrepiece. The Dragonby Dragon, folks. Easily one of the best things I've ever come across so far on my journey around these places. Okay, so this stands across from what is basically just a bit of barren waste ground, effectively. The Dragonby mine is sort of over there-ish, and there's also a railway line over there which we haven't talked about yet, but we will talk about that as we get into Roxby, which is where I'm heading now, the main village in today's parish. On the road to Roxby, we encounter Options Roxby House. It's a special independent school for children on the autism spectrum, similar to Demeter House in Appleby. Here though, all the students are aged from 16 to 18. Also up here is the entrance to Roxby Landfill, which occupies a disused ironstone quarry. This is served by the remnants of the North Lindsey Light Railway, the same railway which we've spoken about before in places like Witton and Wintringham. The part between Scunthorpe and Roxby landfill still exists, and trainloads of household rubbish are transported to here in containers from various locations in Greater Manchester. Oh, and this is a good place for a view or two. Roxby stands on a prominent part of the Lincoln Cliff. As I was driving up here, both the River Humber and the Humber Bridge were clearly visible in the distance. Okay, now it's time to go into the main village, Roxby, and even though it's the main village in this parish, it's still really, really small, and I shouldn't think it's going to take me much more than about half an hour to walk around it. Our start and end point in Roxby is the Old Hall, this building here. Roxby is an oblong-shaped village formed of 4 streets which are laid out geographically: North Street, East Street, South Street and West Street. The name Roxby derives from Old Scandinavian and it means farmstead of a man named Hrocker. There are 2 Roxbys in England, the other is in North Yorkshire. Now on South Street, here we have the vicarage. On the side of a barn opposite that, we come to a parish notice board. A pin board this one, which is always good because it saves my supplies of blue tack. Mark it off folks, 15 to go in North Lincolnshire now. South Street continues and we come next to an old chapel. This is a former primitive Methodist chapel which was built in 1897. These days the original building has been extended and it's been turned into Roxby's Village Hall. Or to give it its proper name, the Roxby Community Centre. So says this board outside it. There you go. Now there's also a map here which is kind of handy. I can show you the village, although this board's not very clean, so hopefully you can see through the sort of muck on the plexiglass here. So I've parked at this very far end here and I'm walking down the more southerly, should I say, of the 2 streets here. I'll make a loop around this section here up to that junction and then walk back along the top street where there's the church, and that will take us back to the car. There's a couple of locations around Roxby which make reference to an anvil. For example, there's a row of bungalows called Anvil Walk. Intrigued, I did some digging but came up empty. I wonder what the connection is there. Note the sign here. Because this part of Lincolnshire is so rural, it has lots of wildlife. So much so, in fact, that in the 1800s, rabbit hunting was a popular sport out here. Next, we have a bus stop where West Street meets North Street. This is known as Roxby Corner, and it's not the easiest place for buses to stop. The bus services that call here are the 350, 355 and the 560. And now we're back to North Street. There's a couple more landmarks to see along here, including the church, a playground and an old school. Roxby has no shops, by the way, but it does have a stall or 2. So we've got a little flower stall here, whoops, plant stall should I say, potted plants. There we go, that's quite nice. For some reason draped in a flag saying "Come on you Hammers." I didn't know West Ham fans come this far north. I thought they were mainly all in London. Mind you, I suppose it's better than supporting Scunthorpe. I'm going to get so much hate for that comment. To go with that, there's a small book exchange not too dissimilar to the one we found in Appleby a couple of doors down. I had no books with me on this occasion, so there's no "how far can a book go" challenge here. Next is Roxby's Old National School. This was built in 1868 and was funded by the Elwes family. It was built to hold 56 children and its attendances were regularly over 40. It's also known there was a previous school here sometime prior to 1841. Almost next door to that is a park, although this could easily be missed. You access this by using a path which runs between the old school and the church, which is really narrow and overhung by trees. And now we're at St Mary's Church, which stands in front of that park. Constructed in the 12th century, this underwent restoration in 1875. It was granted Grade 1 listing status in 1967 by English Heritage. Okay, so war memorial wise here, it's the clock. The clock was erected to the glory of God in grateful recognition of all from this parish who fought in the Great War 1914 to 1918. And the clock, if I just turn back a little bit, you'll be able to see it. There it is. In the porch was a really interesting piece of literature. Roxby has connections to both Roach Abbey, which we met way back in the Maltby episode in Rotherham, and to Drax Abbey in Selby, according to this. You'll notice a lot of flat gravestones in its churchyard. That was to expand the number of grave sites available. It was the idea of one of the church wardens in the 1830s. Some have now become damaged as a result. And speaking of damage, don't be walking on these verges too much. You may remember the ornamental verge we found in New Holland and how it's protected. It's the same fine here as it is there, £100. And that brings us back to Old Hall Lane, where I parked about 35 minutes ago. A small village, this one's been absolutely delightful to tell you the truth, and one that's very varied. I only wish I could have stayed here longer. Okay, with all the walking done and all 3 places, 4 if you count Risby as 2 separate settlements, visited, it's time for today's picture bit. I think I may well go on record here and say that this one is probably the best one in North Lincolnshire that I've done so far. There's nothing against any of the others in North Lincolnshire. I think they're all fantastic, but this one's got a resonance with me for some reason. I've really enjoyed my time here, and I wish I could spend a bit longer in Roxby. And yeah, it might be the dragon in Dragonby that's done it, I don't know, but for whatever reason I've really enjoyed this, and it's been fabulous. And I recommend anyone out there who's never been to this part of North Lincolnshire before to come here and explore it for themselves. For now though, I'm about to go and explore another town here in North Lincolnshire. All it requires me to do is drive up the A1077 for a little way, and I'll come to that town, and that's next week's episode. For now though, this has been the parish of Roxby-cum-Risby, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.